So you'll notice across life that there are a couple of key, very base things that are essential to living life as a human being in a way that one may consider full, that one may feel on a day to day basis as full and complete. And I'm speaking mostly from a male point of view, obviously. It's universally applicable. It applies to women as well, but it's from my point of view, and it's also from the point of view of a heterosexual man. Women are the other half of the whole story, of the whole shebang. They are absolutely essential to life as a human being, and one cannot fully divorce themselves from that fact. It's not optimum. It's not best case scenario to actively avoid interacting with the opposite sex. I mean, there will be periods of pause, maybe, periods of pulling back, periods of reassessing, reorganizing, renewing, maybe between relationships or sort of intermittently, but women are absolutely essential. And for our entire lives, from beginning to end, women affect us. And that's permanent. Women will always affect us just by existing, just by being around. The atmosphere is completely different when a woman is around. It's a complete overhaul of the energy. And you notice it from a young age, from very early on. It's one feels and sees how women affect you, especially women you're attracted to. And that's something that a person slowly learns how to integrate into themselves over time. And the sooner one does that, the better. Because it's akin to having a left and a right hand. It's akin to breathing fully, inhaling and exhaling. If a man is a stone, then a woman is water. If a man is form, shape, matter, then a woman is space. And in my own personal experience, there's been women that I met who strike me, who appear to me as art, as absolute beauty. And I'm not saying this to pedestalize women or praise them. There's two levels. One understands, obviously, that a woman is a human being, just a normal person with flaws like everybody else. But at the same time, from a male point of view, they are the most beautiful human beings that exist. And chemistry is a strange thing because it either happens or it doesn't, either exists or it doesn't. And some men resent the fact that women affect them no matter what. Some men don't like that fact. And that's something that a person shouldn't run from, shouldn't try to protect themselves from. The more men and women are together, interacting, the better. The less siloed the two genders are, the better. The more we can exist as friends on one level and lovers on another, the better. And I've noticed over my life, there's always somebody in my life, there's always a woman in my life who I connect with more than I can connect with any other person. Because I have my male friends, but there's no romantic component, and those bonds are fantastic. I've had male friends my entire life, some since I was 5 years old, for 30 years. But with a woman, that relationship is able to go so much deeper because of the romantic component of how much you connect and merge and become a single entity. And I've never been married. I figure I'll probably do that in my 40s, but we all know that sort of thing when we see it. It's not just physical attraction, it's not just surface level. There's just these levels of chemistry, these levels of bonds, these points of friction that make men and women seem alien to each other on one level and completely familiar on another. It's why there's been volumes and volumes and volumes of books written for men on how to attract women, how to talk to women, how to be around women. It's been this great mystery for so long, but it's so simple. First, a man, before he can really get himself involved in any kind of deep relationship with a woman in a healthy way, he's got to have some things figured out for himself. And I guess you could say the same thing about women. You have to have some things figured out. And you will definitely learn that the hard way. You will definitely enter relationships where you sort of, I guess, import too much of the person you're with. You depend on that person too much for how you feel, for how you are, for your identity. And over time, there's less of you and more of them. There's this imbalance. And it obviously fluctuates. But like I always say, it's right down that middle spot. That middle is the sweetest spot that there is. If you can be anywhere, if you can permanently exist dead between 50-50, then you have a jump start in either direction, spontaneously in real time, as it's needed. If you're all the way down on the right all the time, then when you need to go left, you're 40 points behind. You're not even at zero. And if you're too far to the left, if you're 80 points to the left, then you're 30 points behind when it's time to go right. It makes sense. It's necessary. One has to go to the extremes from time to time, but a person is at their best when they have this constant that they can access and go back to. It's like sprinting versus walking. Like, we all walk, obviously. But sometimes you gotta sprint. But you can't always sprint. Obviously, you can't do that. So you have to return to center. And this is something that I will always say because it's not theoretical. It's how I've existed for as long as I can remember. And it's not necessarily conscious. It just sort of happens. Extremes come and go, and the need to go left and right comes and goes, but there is this center point that I'm always being pulled back to, so that I'm ready to go in any direction at any time if I need to. But it's like I said, you start very young, and you see your first girl, you have your first crush, and it just hits you. It dawns on you. These people, these women, just affect me just by their existence. When there's a woman around, the atmosphere changes. It's palpably different. It totally changes the energy. And a man, if you don't have any good role models, think about it. Hypothetically, what is a good man? Truly, like, what is a good man? What does that look like? How does he move? And why does he move that way? What does he do when he's under pressure? What does he do when he's threatened? What does he do when somebody threatens somebody he cares about? What does he do? How does he work? What kind of work ethic does he have? Is he strong or is he weak? What's his temperament? And the thing is, man, for women, they're going to feel a slave to men, and men are going to feel a slave to women. There's always going to be this weird spot that both the sexes will never understand about each other. Like, there's always going to be this gray area that's left uncharted. And that's where we're different. That's the zone where we have not a single thing in common. But that's a small area. The starting point is always, we're both human beings. We both want the same thing. Generally, everybody does want the same thing. People will say this or that at certain points in their lives because of this or that, because of their experiences so far. But when you really get down to it, everybody wants the same thing. Everybody wants to have this person in their life, this one person, for whom everything about them is safe, where they have this all-powerful sense of trust, this all-powerful bond where it's just easy, where it does feel like you two exist for each other in romantic terms, where it seems like you just fit together. It's natural and it's organic. And you can tell this person everything and anything. And they genuinely love you and care about you. At least one. There doesn't need to be two. Doesn't need to be three. Just one. But a person can end up in a cycle of cultivating dozens and dozens of relationships that are very shallow, that are not that deep at all. And the reason they're not deep is because once a person gets to a certain level, maybe 5% in, they realize something about that other person that makes them recoil, that makes them not want to go any further. The attraction stops, the bond stops, it ices over and it freezes over, for whatever reason. But this one person that everybody wants, it just keeps going. You get this feeling where if you had to choose between doing nothing, being by yourself, being alone, laying down and watching a movie by yourself, if you had to choose between that and this person, you would always pick that person. There's never a time where their company or them being around is something that you don't want. And it's why so many people say they want somebody who's a best friend and a lover. Because those two things, while total opposites, go together, just like everything else. Because that is a full and complete and true human bond between a male and a female, where there is attraction, true attraction, to where it's borderline, let's say magical, to where there's this element that seems a little elevated. At the same time, you're fully aware of their humanity, of their flaws, and those things about them that truly make them human. But everybody wants that. Everybody does, including me. And over my life, I've met so many beautiful women. I've had so many just great relationships, great bonds. And I've always been the sort of person who didn't stop at 5. I just kept going and going and going, because when I like somebody, I am just fascinated by them. And even if I don't plan on marrying them, even if I'm not interested in marriage at that time, I'm just interested in them in the way that I'm interested in a subject. I like the way they laugh, I like the way they sound, I like the way they talk and move, the way they think, and I want to know how they see the world. And that's led to a lot of deep bonds over the years. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. And I couldn't imagine living a life without experiencing the true full love of a woman. Like I would find that very difficult to have as my life. To truly be loved, and loved back is something everybody wants. And however that sounds, however you want to categorize that, feel free to do so, but everybody without exception has this as their number one item in male-female relations. And if everybody wants this thing, yet so few have it, a person has to wonder, why is that? Why is this thing so common in desire, yet so rare an occurrence? It's so rare an occurrence that when it does happen, people remember the story about how they met. They remember the fine details of their first date. Some people know when they look at each other. Like my parents, when my parents first met, my mom, she was loosely seeing, like, I think three men. Not dating them, but sort of talking to them. And my dad was out somewhere, and my mom looked at him, and he looked at her. And she said she knew when she saw him that was her husband. She knew that through and through. And oddly enough, he had the exact same experience. He knew that was his wife. However they got there, whatever happened before that, mattered none. Not at all. Once a person discovers the who, once a person discovers that this person exists in this way, they just want to know about them. They want to get close to them. And that's the driving force. And sex is just another way to know somebody. It's an extension of everything else. Good sex involves somebody that you genuinely care about. I mean, there's different types of sex, obviously. There's meaningless sex. Sort of I guess you could say for sport, but that's a different thing. Because when a man and a woman have sex, obviously they're procreating, but there is a lot more going on there. on the level of the soul. The other day I was thinking about, imagine this scenario. Imagine a facility where, a massive, massive facility where every single thing that a person could do, could want to do, out here in the real world, existed within this facility. You know, you had like football fields, basketball courts, classes for every subject one could imagine, pool tables, gyms, giant kitchens for cooking, places where you develop computer software, an area for aerospace, an area for welding, construction, just a giant facility with different rooms that literally has every single thing that a human being could want. Anything that a human being could do contained within this facility. You could live your entire life there and do anything that you wanted at any point in time just by walking into a room. Say you were there and there were like, let's say 1,000 people there. How do you imagine that would go? What do you think people would do? What would you do? Do you think over time people would start to tweak around with this and tweak around with that, do this and do that, and then eventually land on something that grabs their attention, grabs their interest, and out of that entire facility, they're spending large portions of their time doing that thing? And maybe there's 2 or 3 other things, because there's only so much time in the day. 2 or 3 other things that this person also does as well. Do you think that a person would form a routine? Do you think a person would forever test? Do you think a person would forever go from room to room and not stay for very long in each room? Or do you think a person would find this one room and just keep going back? How do you think that kind of society would arrange itself? How do you think that kind of society would feel on a day-to-day basis? All access, full access, everything, food's provided. Would you still have people who became overweight if you had a gym there and all that stuff? Would you still have people who just kind of laid in bed until 12 in the afternoon? If everything was available, would you still have people who didn't become very knowledgeable? Would you still have people who didn't master a trade or a craft? Would you still have people who you would consider the fat versus the lean muscle? Do you think if everything was provided to everybody in a single place, do you think you would end up in the exact same situation that we have out here? Do you think that the main factor that shapes people's lives is lack of access? In other words, do you think the reason why people do what they do is because they want to be doing something that they can't do or don't know how to get to? I think if you had that arrangement, you would end up with the exact same thing as you have anywhere else. You would have the exact same range of, I guess you could say, excellence and slackers. You would have people who go to the weed room and just smoke weed and listen to music. And I don't say this in a critical way or a judgmental way, just purely for the sake of thinking, for the sake of observation. You would have people who find the room that's playing ping pong and doing shots and go to that room. You'd have a room where there's a bunch of people playing chess. And to one person that might sound like the most boring possible thing you can do, but there's going to be people who are there every single day playing chess. And then there's going to be people who they see there every day too. And all of a sudden, they're going to click. Because that's what's happening out here all the time anyway. I think no matter what you did with people, if you gave them a perfectly utopian environment, I mean perfect, you do not have to work whatsoever, everything is provided, you're all good, you would still have the exact same range of humans. You would still have criminals, you would still have people who murder, you would still have people who rape, you would still have thieves, you would still have people who completely dominate everything they do. You would still have people who grab everybody's attention. You would still have, out of those 1,000 people, there would be one person who everybody knew. And there would be one person who nobody knew. And that one person that everybody knew, they would have a group of friends who most people knew. I think no matter what conditions you put us in, because here in the United States, thinking on a full scale for all of human history and the relative conditions, right now in the United States, that's exactly what we have, except it's spread out. But that's our exact scenario. There's this thing where I think it's called the Pareto distribution, where there were fighter aces in World War II. There was always these guys who would shoot down 6 or 7 planes per fight. And there were very few of them. There'd be 1% of all pilots would be absolutely excellent. They would just shoot down 6, 7 planes per battle, and then 99% wouldn't kill any. Or maybe get 1 or 2, but the smallest, tiniest 1%, there's always going to be a 1%, let's put it that way. In basketball, there's always going to be a 1%. That one player, those 2 players, who are just different. When it comes to finance, when it comes to business, in every single human affair, there's always going to be 1, 2, or a group of people who just absolutely dominate. And this isn't theoretical as well. This is very, very well documented. And those people become obsessed with whatever it is that they're involved with. I mean obsessed. To the point where you might call it unhealthy, but they live and breathe it. And that shapes in every society, in every area of society, that's exactly what happens. There are many, many, many authors, but there are a very small handful of authors whose names we all know. On YouTube, it's full of videos, but there's a small handful of videos with just millions and millions and millions of views that everybody knows. No matter where you put human beings, no matter what setting, there will always be this unconscious formation of all the way to the left and all the way to the right. I don't mean that in political terms, I just mean that in terms of spectrum. And sometimes it's a strange thing. A person doesn't even really try. That's just who they are. It's very, very good irony. The person who really, really tries to get that top spot, who really wants to be well liked, who wants to be that person that everybody knows, will never succeed at it. Because by virtue of trying to get to that spot, you're simultaneously admitting that you're not there. And only one person can be there. And that person didn't ask to be there. That person oftentimes doesn't like the attention. But that's who they are. So, who are you? Do you fit somewhere? Is there a place that you go? Is there a group of people? Do you understand where you fit in this? Are you somebody who has a clear space, a clear position on this spectrum? Or are you somebody who is completely able to move outside of it? Who is independent of it? Those people are even less common. They're 1% of the 1%. They're the ones who go off into the woods and see things about the universe, see the truth, and they just cannot be really defined. They really can't be placed on the spectrum. It's like it's like Gandhi. Now imagine Gandhi in a room full of all kinds of different people, the best of the best, billionaires, athletes, just all the best people. Gandhi doesn't really fit. You can't really say he's above them, and you definitely can't say he's below them. He's everywhere. He's the entire thing. He is somehow outside of the game. Jesus is another person. Obviously, that's an extreme example, but there are also those people who are like that, who simply drift as they please onto any point in the spectrum and exist there perfectly comfortably, while being perfectly able to observe the game. And when I say game, I basically mean the scheme. These things aren't like something that somebody thought up and decided to enact in society. These things aren't pre-thought. These things grow organically. You wouldn't have to lay down rules. You wouldn't have to tell anybody anything beforehand. All you would have to do is put people together. And trillions of pings and would start going back and forth, and people would sort themselves out. And on one level, everybody is equally respectable. Everybody as a human being gets that respect. Everybody is equal on one level, and on another level, completely unequal, completely different. And that's the thing. A person can get sucked up into that game. It's like I said a little while ago. Sometimes the dramatics of life pull you in, and you have to detach sometimes. If you don't detach, you might just start taking that kind of stuff a little bit too seriously. You might think that that's everything, that that's all that there is. Because that sort of thing it's a seduction. It's a true seduction. That sort of life can seduce you. You seduce yourself into thinking certain things about yourself and about life and about what life is. We always seem to have a huge amount of respect for somebody who's at the top, yet humble, yet down to earth and normal, who doesn't seem to care or take the fact that they are at the top too seriously. They don't really care if they're at the top or at the bottom. And irony is, it's everywhere. It's ironic that in order to be somebody that everybody loves, you have to not care whether or not you're loved. If you care whether or not you're loved, you will find difficulty, because you want love, and love is not ours to command. Love is something that it is completely spontaneous, and it either exists or it doesn't. And if one person loves you, then two people can love you, then three, then four, then five, and so on. But what I was talking about earlier, there's always one love that we really want. And it isn't romantic comedies, or it isn't love stories that shaped us into thinking this. We thought this and made love stories and romantic comedies to represent it. These things happened organically, and we imitated it with art. And then we start to imitate that art. It's a reverberation. And it keeps going and going and going.